Dream a little dream of me.
Welcome kindreds, it's Jessica TheStoryWitch, and this video is going to be showing you 5 of my moon decks and 5 ways that I use them. And the idea for this video kind of came to me because I am trying to be more conscious about my purchasing. I know lots of other people are. We've had lots of kind of people posting about depth years and things like that. And I still wanted to be able to share kind of tarot and oracle content, but in a way that felt meaningful and useful. So the idea is that I am going to share 5 of my decks, and I'll show you those decks in a moment. But you certainly don't need to have 5 decks to be able to use the ideas in this video. So I'm hoping that if you are looking for a moon deck, this will be kind of useful. But if you already have a moon deck and perhaps you don't use it as much as you'd like to, or you want to have some kind of inspiration, some new ways of using it, then I'm hoping this video will be useful for you. So these are the 5 decks that I am going to use to show you during this video. This one is a little bit unusual. This one I got in a Macabre box when I'm subscribing to Macabre box. It is by _journal on Instagram. I don't believe that this deck is available anymore. It is like an indie producer, but the same artist does make other things which are available now. And to be honest, when I was trying to find, because it doesn't actually say on here that I could find anywhere the name of this author. I think I edged it. Can you see it's edged in black? I think I edged it in black. I didn't do a brilliant job by the looks of it either. But yeah, this is a really beautiful deck that I use mainly as an altar deck, but I won't get ahead of myself. The next deck, this is the only tarot deck. The other 3 are all oracles. Although this one's kind of weird, kind of hybrid. So this is the Dark Days Tarot. I'm actually going to move the rest of those out of the way so I can show you this a little bit better. This is the Dark Days Tarot. It's not specifically, it doesn't say it's not like a moon tarot specifically, but it very much is based on using with the moon and the moon phases. So I feel like this does qualify as a moon deck. You don't see as many moon tarot decks as you do oracle decks, so I think this is quite an interesting one. I have put it in order, so hopefully I haven't just messed that up. I'm going to show you some of the cards. I won't do a complete walkthrough because that would take an age, but just for you to get a kind of idea of what this deck is about. These are the mages. The mages are all white, and you can probably notice that the moons and the moon phases are woven into these, and the mages tend to have all of the phases on them, whereas the minors, when we get to them, don't necessarily have all of them on, but not all of them do actually. You can see this one's got lots of crescents on it there, and then the moon. Unsurprisingly, in the moon deck. So yeah, this is the swords suit. It's unusual imagery and it is an unusual deck. I love it for some things, and then some things kind of get on my nerves about it, like the font is really, it's beautiful, but it's really tiny and really difficult to read. So I probably shouldn't have paused on this card, but you can see like some of the imagery is really brutal as well. And because it's black and white, it's almost like it's more stark. It is a quite stark deck, and I have had some quite harsh almost readings with this deck. It does not beat around the bush at all. Yeah, but that said, it does, you know, it's a good reader. It does what it says. In the guidebook for this deck, it explains about how to read the cards. It has a little bit about how to read, you know, the interpretation that is on the cards. Like some of them are very similar to the Rider-Waite basic interpretation, although this is more kind of Thoth-based system because it does have justice and strength the other way around. And I'm not sure if the cups and the swords and the wands are also the other way around as well. But you can tell basically from the imagery what you are dealing with here. In the book, this is what I was going to say. In the book, it does say that you can read this deck in a few different ways. So if you're used to reading tarot reversals, you'll know that you can read cards upright, or you can read them reverse, and often that gives you like a kind of reversed meaning. It's not necessarily the opposite meaning, but it will be a different meaning, a different sort of neons. In the book for this, it talks about being able to read, because it's square, you can read it this way, you can read it this way, which is the energy kind of moving further on from what is here. So like if you had an ace card, but it was here in this orientation, then it wouldn't be like the very start. You'd already have kind of got to first quarter moon with whatever it is that is becoming manifest. And then that is like the kind of straight reversal. And then you can also read it that way, which is like that energy is coming in. So say you like drew the star card and you're hoping for some healing, and you drew it this way. It's like healing is coming, but it's not quite there yet. Do you see what I mean? So it is a little bit complex, but there's some absolutely gorgeous. I love, this is one of my favorite Tens of Pentacles. And then some of them, like I said, some of them are really hard to bear, some of those cards. Lots of kind of just body parts as well, rather than whole humans. But there are also lots of whole humans in that deck, along with some of their animals as well. So that is the Dark Days Tarot. The book is very tiny. A short introduction, which, like I said, explains about different ways of reading the cards, and then a little bit about each card. I don't know, I don't think it's got any spreads in here. Maybe it has. Oh, you are. Yeah, it does. Suggested layouts at the back for a daily draw or relationship spread, 3-card spread, and the direction. So they're calling this North Earth, full moon, East air, first quarter, South fire, dark, and West water, last quarter. So yeah, it adds another level of neons to that deck, which can be confusing, I won't lie, but is also adds, you know, something else that you can use if you want to. So like I said, the other 3 here are all, that's an indie deck as well, which I bought from Little Red Tarot, I think. So I'm not sure if that's still available or not, but it might still be available. I'm not sure. I've had it a few years. And then these 3 are all oracle decks, like I said. These 2 are both mass market, very easy to get hold of, very reasonably priced. This one is an indie deck. I'll show this first, actually. This I bought secondhand. It is gorgeous, but again, I think it's something about the moon and fonts is that people seem to choose these really like kind of squirrely, hard to read fonts. I won't show the book just now, actually, because there's some interesting stuff in there that I will show you. This is an oracle deck, but it kind of has a whole system unto itself. So I did put this in order. I'll just take the back cards out. So this tells you a little bit more. It's by Spirit de la Lune, which is the name of the deck. Moondaughter.com is the website. And then they've all got these gorgeous backs, which have got this little bit of foil. So that's what the backs of the cards look like. And this is just like general info, a moon blessing. And like, look, this is what I mean about the font. Silver moon of the starry night, bless my reading with your light. As the cards unfold, the wisdom they hold, I am open to receive your luminous sight. So, you know, it is difficult to read. I haven't got my glasses on, to be fair, but it's difficult to read. And then like this font is much easier. But that kind of swirly font is used on all of the cards, so that makes it a little bit tricky. It's got the phases, and it's quite based in the elements, this deck as well, and it does bring in some astrology. So if you want to work with all of those things, this deck is quite nice for that. So let me just show you. The cards are round, as you can see. So similarly to the Dark Days, which can be read in different ways, they do also say that you can read these cards in different ways. You know, being a circle, it means there's many options of interpretation, which, to be honest, is
it's not something that I tend to use with these cards at all. So, but you know, you may. So there's a set of cards which are the different types of moons. They call these the mandala cards, and they're almost like the majors in tarot kind of this system. So they all look like mandalas, and they all have the moon. They've used the Lakota names for the moon, which they talk about in the book, and also have like associated like keywords with them. So that makes them kind of useful to use as an oracle, because it's just got like a simple keyword on it. I find the imagery, some of the imagery reads much better for me than others. I don't find with the mandalas that I get a whole heap out of the imagery, but the rest of the cards, which you'll see. Okay, so when we get here, when we get onto the actual moon cards themselves, I use these more, and I'll explain about that when I go into the ways of using the decks in the second part of the video. So as you can see, it literally goes through all of the phases with the light creeping further and further across the face of the moon. And then when you get to the almost first quarter, so these are all the like from new to first quarter, it brings in the 3 air signs as well, because they see this as being the air part of the deck. So we've got Gemini, we've got Libra, we've got Aquarius, and then it goes back to the moons. So this was something that confused me first of all when I was first using it, and this is now fire. So they say all of these phases are fire phases of the moon, which are associated with that more fiery kind of outward going energy. And then when we get to the full, almost full, we get Aries, Leo and Sagittarius, the 3 fire signs. And then when we get to full moon, this is now going with that water energy, I believe. Is it? Or is it? Yeah, water energy, because we go earth at the end. So we have Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, and then the last quarter, and we're into the earth, that kind of ending back down into the dark. And then we get the earth signs. So we have Taurus, Virgo and Capricorn. So that is that whole deck. The guidebook has a lot in it. It explains about different ways of using, it's like I said, it's got things like solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, supermoon and stuff in with these as well. So it explains about the 4 turnings, the phases, and then the deck then does follow the different moons as we go through. For every one of the mandala cards, there is a spread in this book. So that, if you're looking for something with more spreads, then this is quite a good place to look, because it has some nice stuff in here. I've used some of these, I haven't used all of them, and I found them quite interesting. To be honest, I sometimes do them not with these cards. I sometimes prefer to do the spread, only use a different deck instead. So one that's a little bit easier to read, because I don't find this deck that easy to read. I find it really beautiful for lots of other things, and useful from the point of view of these, and lovely for having the different moon, oh, I can't find one, having these different moon pictures, but I don't find it that great for doing like a kind of actual reading with, although it can, and especially if you're doing a more simple kind of oracle based reading, it does work for that. So, and obviously that's just my opinion, you might be different. Pop that one away. So let's look at the Moonology one next. This one, you know, has been everywhere. Similarly with the book by Yasmin Boland. I do find her offerings kind of, well, it's a lot of the stuff with like the Hay House stuff is that you can't really get away from it. It's a little bit salesy, But you know, it's fine, and it's quite reasonably priced. It was less than £20, I think closer to £15 than £20. It has the moon phases in here, and it also has these like kind of keywords that go with it. So like you can use this as just a straight oracle, and you can also use it to show the phases. Let me go through, because it's got a few different types of cards in here that I want to show you. So those were the main phase cards. And now it goes into the new moons in each of the signs. So it has those cards too, through all 12 of the signs of the zodiac. Again, with the key phrases. So you could use it for oracle, or you can also use it for kind of learning about that. And then the same again, only this time with the full moons. I love the imagery on these ones, the sign within the full moon. It's pretty. Oops. So yeah, I did put this deck in order. I put all of the decks in order, working hard for this video. So give me a like. And then it's got some extra things here. We've got the new moon eclipse, the full moon eclipse, the waxing moon, the waning moon, the void of course moon, cardinal moon, the fixed moon, the mutable moon. Those relate to the different signs, which are split into cardinal, mutable and fixed. Supermoon, blue moon, south node and north node. So it's got all those kind of astrology points in there. So if the astrology is something that you are wanting to get into, then that deck definitely has that covered. And then last but not least, this is the Queen of the Moon Oracle by Stacey DeMarco. When I first got this, I didn't think very much of it. I was like, it wasn't, I think, what I was expecting. But actually, having looked back at it and used it a bit more, I've actually got quite a lot of good use for this deck. It's a little bit shiny, but that's obviously just the way the cards are. So again, it's got the phases, although that doesn't look very new moony, that picture on there, but there we go. And then it has got like crescent 1, crescent 2, crescent 3. So you can see the actual, but it does have this other imagery as well. So if you're used to oracle decks, this one is the one that is most like a kind of typical oracle deck and can very much be used in that way. And that is the way that I tend to use this deck. I don't really use it as a moon deck as such. I use it much more as a straight up oracle deck. But as you can see, the pictures are really beautiful. There are keywords on here too. I'll go a little bit quicker because there's quite a few cards here to get through. But you could use it for the phases too. There'd be nothing to actually stop you from using it for that, because obviously it does all relate to that. That is where the meaning of the card has been drawn from, is from that phase. But the extra bits of imagery is quite interesting to me, and something that like I said, I kind of overlooked first of all, but it's actually made this deck more accessible and more of a good reader for me than, well, this is the only one that reads well as an oracle for me, to be honest. The book is very sort of straightforward. It gives you like a little bit of info about the cards and about the moon and how to use the moon. Stacey DeMarco is based in Australia, and she is a practicing witch, and so she does have a bit more of that kind of background, which has made this a bit more useful, I think. And then it just goes through with a little bit about each card, so you can look up if you're doing, if you're using it as an oracle. And the illustrator is Kinga Bridski, who's a Hungarian artist. I'm probably saying her name wrong, but yeah, I think it's really beautiful. So those are all 5 decks shown, and now let's talk about some ways in which you might want to use a deck if you have one or more of these, or if you have a different kind of moon deck altogether.
The first way I'm going to suggest you use your decks is probably the most obvious one, and that is for divination. That tends to be what they're for. So you might want to do a daily draw with the deck. Even though they're moon decks, they still work really well for this. Some better than others. Like a good deck that I would find for this would be the Queen of the Moon Oracle, because that is a little bit more kind of oracle based. If I was going to be doing like an actual tarot reading for something, then I would probably use the Dark Days Tarot deck instead. But you can use oracle decks in the way of tarot, you know, in a tarot spread. You just have to interpret them in that more in a more story based way. Because they are moon decks, I find they're also very good for using to do moon based readings, like full moon and dark moon readings. I post prompts for doing readings on the full and dark moon here on YouTube on like the community tab. There are loads of people who offer really good moon spreads and things like that as well. Ethne does them. If you're on Instagram and you look for like Cancer new moon tarot spread, something like that, then you know there's so many brilliant people making really great things now, so you can use your cards for that too. Second way that I think it is good to use your moon decks, especially if you are just starting to kind of learn what it means when the moon is in a certain phase, or even when it is in a certain sign, is to use the decks as a learning tool. Most of the moon decks come with the moon phases in them, and then lots of them also have extra things like eclipses and blue moons and super moons and things like that. So you could, there's quite a few different ways you could do this. You could just draw a card every day, see what it is, which moon phase it is. It could even be a daily draw card as well. You can combine these two practices, and then you can see what is on that card, which moon phase, read what it says in the booklet about that particular phase, if there is a booklet with your deck. If not, then you can just like look up what energy is that particular phase talking about. You can also then layer in the astrology if you want to, so you can look at what sign the moon is in. I think the Moonology deck is the only one that I know of. I'm sure there must be others. There will be others out there, but the Moonology deck is the only one that I have that has the astrology as well. I don't really love that deck, like I said, but it does have the moon in different signs. So if you were wanting to learn that, then using that deck might be a useful way of doing it. Or you could just literally write out the different signs, the different signs of the zodiac. You could take a card from any moon deck that has the phases on, and then you could just take one of your own self-made cards with the signs on and put them together, and then you can just look up that particular thing. So you might draw like full moon in Gemini or whatever, and then you would look up what does that actually mean, or just stick to doing the actual signs first and then layer it in with the phases afterwards, because once you really know the phases, then it's easy to apply that to the signs. And once you really understand what the signs are all about, then it's easy to kind of interlock that in with the phases too. The third one kind of fits in with that, using it as a learning tool point, which was number 2, and that is to use the cards as altar cards or shrine for your moon shrine. I have a little moon shrine set up, and I actually use the cards on there. And I was at one point using the Spirit de la Lune cards, which meant that I had to change the card every single day. But I tend to work with my moon shrine, moon altar, because I do kind of work at it as well, so it's not just specifically a shrine. I tend to work with it on Mondays, moon days, more. So I just change the cards on a Monday. So I find using a more simple deck there works for me. You know, using a deck on there that you love the look of is obviously really helpful too. And you can just use it, like if you can't make a whole moon altar, or if you want to make just something very discreet, then a card, perhaps a stone, maybe a moonstone, you know, and you're done. You've got it. A little candle maybe. Really good focusing in tool. It helps you to link with that learning that you're doing, like I talked about in point 2. It gives you a kind of physical space in your room where you can see that phase card as you're, you know, going about your day, or somewhere to check in, you know, at some point during the day. And it also is it's like a connection point for you as well. So it seems very simple, just the act of like turning that card each day if you're using a deck that has all of the phases, but it is really kind of centering and connecting practice. So I do really recommend that. And you can do that, like I said, I think pretty much every moon deck I have seen has got the phases. It might not have, 29 days of phases, but most of them have got at least the 4 quarters, but lots of them have got things in between as well. So, you could be checking in with that daily and it would work really, really well. So the fourth way is something that perhaps is not so often talked about, and that is to use the moon deck during ritual. This could be very, very simple. You could just use the 4 quarters, so like the full moon, the new moon, and the first quarter and the last quarter to mark the quarters, if you call quarters, or even if you're just setting up an altar, you might want to use those cards to lay out your altar. So the way I do it is like the new moon is the east, and then I do change it up. Sometimes I'll use the new moon as north and then do the first quarter as east, and then the full moon as south, and then the last quarter as west. That's kind of how I've been working with it more in the last few years, but other people can, you can do it however, which way makes sense to you to do it like that. If you've got a deck that's got crescents, then you might want to use the crescent for east, and take it from there. Number 5, which kind of does cross over with point number 4 as well, is again to be able to use the cards in spell work by using the card to represent the action that you are using in that particular ritual or spellwork. So if you were doing a ritual to like attract something, like you wanted to bring a new job your way or bring a person your way, something like that, then it would be good to use like a kind of full moon, full attraction kind of energy. Whereas if you wanted to, if you were like doing some spell work to get rid of a bad habit, something like that, then you could use it, use a waning moon to be like getting rid of that energy. So using them as like symbols, the symbols speak to you on a much deeper level, and they kind of speak, it's universal language. So I find using that with spell works really effective. So if you're doing like a candle spell, then you can just like place the card underneath the candle or next to the candle, or if you're doing a jar spell, do the same. You can place the jar onto the card while it's doing its thing. You can also use the cards for timing in spell work. So timing is a really tricky thing I find to get to kind of weave into spell work, especially because it's like the universe doesn't use the same calendars as humans do. But by using the moon cards to represent timings, I find that you can have a much more smooth conversation with the universal forces or your higher power, however you see your kind of spell work manifesting. So if you were doing spell work and you want a result by a certain time, for example, then you could choose a corresponding card from your moon deck and use that, weave that in to your spell work. You can also use this actually in the divination as well. I probably should have covered this in point 1, but it ties in well here too, in that if you were doing a general tarot reading for like something that's going to happen and you want to know a time scale for that, then you could draw a card from your moon deck to go alongside that reading, which will give you an indicator of the timing that you are working with. I hope that that has been useful and interesting, and that you've got new ways and new ideas about using the moon decks. They're not just beautiful things for show. They are so beautiful though, aren't they? I know they are. There's so much gorgeous artwork out there now. It's really, really hard to choose. Let me know what you think. Let me know which decks you liked, perhaps which decks you didn't like, if you have different decks and ways that you use them as well, because that's wonderful for me to learn new ways of doing things as well. Thank you so much for watching. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.